Hey guys, and welcome back to more Amnesia. I think I'm going to call this series Amnesia Illuminated because we're illuminating the Dark Descent. You see, that's the joke. Okay. Last time we discovered, what did we learn? We learned that we're Daniel from Mayfair in London, and we need to kill Alexander of Brennenburg Castle, the very castle we presently reside in right now. There's a few interesting things in this room that we haven't quite seen yet. The first most interesting thing perhaps is over here. I think this is where we see, well, first of all, let's just, loot the area. We've got to loot slightly. Again, the castle is full of oil and tinderboxes, possibly because it's a game, possibly because, old castles like this need lots of oil and tinderboxes. Can we actually light this? Oh, there's more cockroaches. Lovely. Can we actually light this? No such luck. More tinderboxes. So many tinderboxes in this area. Actually, is there more tinderboxes like hiding behind these boxes? Look, there's oil hiding behind these boxes. There's oil and tinderboxes everywhere. Get out of here, box. We see something quite interesting here. We see the first physical manifestation of the shadow. I must admit, I'm not entirely certain if this literally is the shadow, or this is simply the shadow's effects on reality. From what we learn in the game later, perhaps this is purely a side effect of what the shadow does, and this is not the shadow itself. And now it sounds quite organic in nature. The door indeed no longer functions like a door, and in fact was locked anyway. Sadly, Daniel's last-ditch effort to escape from Brennenburg Castle is defeated by that which hunts him so. If we come down here, now curiously, look, I just want to look at the level design for a moment. The beams of light here, directing the player. Light actually, I guess that's fog refracting light, suggesting perhaps that this is the way forward. Indeed, this is the way forward, yet a lovely Latin sign. Fabrica Liquitoria. Fabrica, as in fabricate, because Latin. Illiquitoria, liquid room? Or maybe, more accurately, elixir room, perhaps. Illiquitoria? Liquid? Elixir? Could be either or both. If we try and go through here, we find that, oh dear, our path is indeed further blocked. It is tough and pliant. It can't be torn by hand or tools. The game hints that we must find another means by which to progress. Now, there's an interesting event up ahead, which, let's just see what happens. Let's go up the stairs and just see what happens. We hear a shrill voice guiding us in this direction. Funny thing is, oh look, Stilla Vinrea, wine cellar, laboratory. Curiously, that voice, if you go down here first, you actually hear the voice coming from the stairs. Very much so to guide the player, to make sure the player is aware when they come through this area that that there are two ways you can go, and at the same time, as well as informing the player that there's two ways you can go, also getting across the fact that Daniel might be completely nuts, or the player might be completely nuts, or this place might be just very haunted somehow. We're not going to go into the wine cellar or the laboratory today. Instead, we're going to go through the archives. There are many interesting things in the archives. Hold on, I don't think I noted these before, but there are doors with these boards all over them that the game uses to make very clear that nope, you cannot go here, at least right now. A collapsed section of the castle here. Actually, can we see outside the windows? I don't think we can. No, we can't see outside the windows. They're just props, essentially, to put some light into the room. Ah, look. The tabularium. Or archives in English. Down here, I always wondered why down here exists, and this feels like this might be an alternative entrance into the starting area of the game. Yet, you never know. You never know. Right, into the archives. A fragrant taste of rose lingered in his mouth. Turkish delights, he thought, just like the ones at the consult in Constantinople, I think that was. The sound, the first thing I want to note is the sound. This area sounds distinctly different to the first two areas we went through. The first two areas sounded like quite hollow, quite windy. These sound more, well, groaning, to be honest. The door here, off its hinges, perhaps something escaped from the rare books room, because it is, of course, indeed going in this direction. A pile of torn up papers, perhaps the door wasn't removed recently. We have more roaches here. We have more things the player can interact with. The player can indeed perhaps attempt to find more things and turn their back on the door for a moment. Perhaps to be crept upon by something nasty. What is this guy doing? Is he holding a sword, stabbing it downwards? I never really knew what he was doing. He's actually kneeling, come to note. I didn't really notice that before. How do we rotate? There we go. He's actually kneeling and stabbing? I'm not really sure. However, we encounter the first of Daniel's diary notes.
16th of May, 1839. The unflinching African sun has continued to plague our expedition, making it impossible to dig until dusk. How Professor Herbert managed to find the location in these vast plains of nothingness remains a mystery to me. When I asked him about the tomb again, he told me about the legend of Tin Hanan, the mother of us all. An interesting story in its own right, but I can't help feeling there's more. Later that evening, we uncovered a passage beneath the dunes leading to a sand-covered stone structure. The professor was confident it was the tomb we sought and ordered the others to clear the way late into the dark, cold night. Tomorrow, I shall lead the men into the ancient structure, hoping to reach the burial chamber. No matter what the professor is keeping from me, the dig should yield something interesting to take back to London and the British Museum.
I just want to note, actually, before we go any further, the voice acting in this game is really, really damn good. Whoops. It is really very good. I enjoy it so much. It actually changes the game quite substantially. So, we're in Algeria, in Africa, and we are hunting for a tomb of some kind. Professor Herbert apparently managed to find it somehow. Curious. I wonder how he found it. I'm not sure if we do encounter him again. I wonder what the legend of Tin Hinan is. I'm not sure if it's actually alluded to in the game any further. And so this is the 16th, take note, this is the 16th. They have in fact found the entrance to the tomb, and Daniel is hoping to lead the party onwards down the next day. Of course, this is a diary, so he will have been writing this in the evening of the 16th, presumably. And also, it's worthy of note here that supposedly Daniel is working for the British Museum in London. He, lives in Mayfair in London, so, perfectly reasonable to perhaps assume that. I just want to note the architectural style. Reminds me very much of, like, a Victorian house. It's a lot of effort to cover the whole wall in wallpaper, so you just cover the panels on the wall in wallpaper. Apparently. So this area, I just want to discuss like the layout of this area. It's quite confusing actually initially when you first enter this area. Also there's a fair few dark rooms as well. Presumably to keep the books safe from... Oh yeah, we're actually going insane here. We don't want to go too insane right now. Presumably to keep the books relatively safe from... another note. Safe from, you know, damage. Because flames are harmful to books. What does this say? Ah, this is Wilhelm's contract. I hereby offer my full attention and services to Alexander, Baron of Brennenburg. This contract will reign for a total of 3 years, when my freedom shall return to me. In addition, Alexander, Baron of Brennenburg, is to recommend my services at the Prussian Royal Court and within the sanctum of the Order of the Black Eagle. May no man break this seal. Wilhelm, House of Gerich. I guess that's pronounced because it'll be German, or Germanic sounding. Wilhelm has signed his life away for 3 years, essentially, to Alexander Brennenburg. How suspect. I wonder what Wilhelm is going to get up to in this time. Another tinderbox. Anything in here? No, nothing in here. Again, what room are we actually in now? Is this room labelled at all? Let's see if this room is labelled. This room is... Oh, it is labelled. The catalogues. So this is where you would come if you wanted to try and figure out where in the archives your book you're looking for is. We have... We're out of oil. Let's get some oil in there. We have a lot of tin boxes. So we try and proceed. And we can... Oh yes, this is not the door I thought it was. This is the study. This studium, as it might be pronounced in Latin. What is over here? Oh yes, this takes you back to the entrance door over there. I love those perspective changes on the camera. Oh, someone doesn't sound happy. This area is meant to feel very much like you are not alone. And indeed, perhaps you aren't. Perhaps you aren't. Aha! Another note of Daniel's, I believe.
17th of May, 1839. My hands tremble as I write. I feel a need to document my tribulation, for I fear that my memory will fail me if I linger. Today, I took some men and ventured into the dark, ancient passage we uncovered. Our torches burned faintly in the murky air as we slowly made our way underground. The men were superstitious and fearful. They argued loudly, and I felt their strange language getting to me. I mustered my strength and yelled at them to continue down the slopes and broken steps. The crudely carved passage confused me. It looked much older than the 4th century structure we had expected. The twisting path emerged into a great antechamber. The walls were lined with statues unlike any I'd ever seen. Despite their unearthly quality, I felt a strange familiarity toward them, which haunts me still. At the far end of the chamber, a great slab of stone sealed off whatever lay ahead. I gave the order to raise it, and as I pushed through the narrow space, the heavy stone suddenly dropped, sealing me inside. I was trapped.
Way to cliffhanger that, Daniel. So this... I keep pressing the wrong button. So this note really reveals a bit about Daniel's personality, or perhaps his past personality, or perhaps one of his past personalities, another train of thought suggests. So this is the event of the 17th. I'm not sure if this... I don't think this was written on the 17th. I'm pretty sure this was the event of the 17th. Or at least as far as Daniel can tell, the events of the 17th. So they went into the dark passage that they uncovered. The men were superstitious and fearful. They argued loudly, and I felt their strange language getting to me. I mustered my strength and yelled at them to continue down the slopes and broken steps. Daniel is determined to go into this place because he's, I'm guessing, an historian of some kind, or at least some kind of treasure hunter, perhaps not too far from the Indiana Jones style, working for the British Museum and all. And, well, not that Indiana Jones actually worked for the British Museum. Never mind. And he insisted to the natives that they must continue, and they obeyed him. Presumably, he at some point had quite a commanding impact on them. And also, look, further down, the crudely carved passage confused me. It looked much older than the 4th century structure we had expected. So this game takes place in, you know, 1800 and something. I think it's like 1841 or something? Something like that. 4th century. So, the passage they're in was 300 odd years old, or I expected it to be 300 odd years old. And yet it seemed like it was much older. Could it be much older? Well, it's in Africa, Algeria specifically, so it could potentially be much older. But why would it be much older than they were expecting? And to be fair, the game doesn't elaborate on this, but it says much older, so significantly older than like 1,400 years, or nearly 1,500 years old. It's pretty old. Oh well, everyone continued on, and then they reached the Great Slab, and then Daniel was indeed stuck behind the slab at the end there. Right, so just, you know, loot the area. I mean, we've got to loot the area. My loot hoarding still comes through to me, even though, you know, there's not too much point to looting in this. Okay, into the next corridor. Now, there is an interesting event here. For some reason, so many people feel urged to pick up this pot here. I'm not sure why. It doesn't really do anything. I have no idea why that's really in the game. I guess this pot is like the first sign, I'm just gonna light this, is like the first sign of anything a little bit different through this whole area, and just people feel compelled to pick it up even though it has no obvious value. I love that. That is just brilliant, adding that in there. Is there anything hidden around here? No? No? Maybe. Okay. What do we have now? So we've just left the study. Now we're going to the old tomes room. I'm just following the natural path that the people would often take through the game. At least it's the path I took the first time I played the game. I'm just going to light this up a bit. Oh yeah, we've got the book that falls off the shelf. Sorry, I forgot. And then piano playing in the background. I forgot about the book falling off the shelf there. Dear me. Dear me. We have a fake chest here. There are fake chests throughout the game. They don't work as chests, but they can hide things occasionally. I don't think this particular one actually hides anything. However, the fire here does indeed hide something. There's a tinderbox in there. This one, however, does hide something. Oil and tinderbox. How much oil do I have now? A fair bit. I guess I should put it in the lamp, but whatever. We'll just, you know, use it steadily and slowly. So this is the old tomes room, is it? Is this the old tomes room? Yeah, and it indeed has old tomes, amongst other things. We have some boxes and other things. Nothing too special in here, apart from the book that falls off the shelf there, which I quite appreciate. Okay. Moving on, as one would do through this area. Aha, we have a corner that's going to drive me insane very slowly because it's actually dark here. It's so weird that Daniel is afraid of the dark. It's not really that dark. We could light this, but I think we'll just try and get into the local history room. It won't open. It's locked. Oh no. Well, we take the next obvious choice into a sort of art gallery with some very nice looking paintings. And oh, was this the piano that was making sound before? Oh, I love it. It is just so good. And we can actually see outside here. We can see into Brennenburg Forest slightly. I mean, we can see about 5 trees, admittedly. But we indeed can actually see these trees. Moving on. What else do we see? Ah, we see the corridor whence we came. And nothing more? Nothing more for the moment. I must admit, this is a very nicely decorated art gallery. I wonder how some of these... there's only one hole in this room, but I do wonder how this hole came to be. Did the timber just rot? Did something fall? What could have possibly fallen on it to create a hole of that nature? Oh, we're not alone, guys. We're not alone. Oh, hello. We've got some blood dripping from above. What could cause that? And someone... So this has fallen down and collapsed, evidently. And yet someone's patched it up very loosely. I wonder if it's strong enough to hold. Oh no, we're blocked in on this side as well. Okay, but at least we've got a piano we can play on, and some more lamp oil, of course. Game being very generous with this lamp oil at this moment in time. It's another piano. It's the second piano we've encountered in this area. Let's just get a bit of light going here. So let's see what's going on. I don't think... Is there anything in here? I don't think there is actually anything in here of use. No, just a bunch of scrolls that are of no particular use. The game engine, of course, making the scrolls actually behave kind of nicely. I love how... In other games, the physics of objects is really weird sometimes, but I wouldn't call this natural per se, because I mean the scroll should unroll, but I always like the physics engines in the Amnesia games. Anyway, we've now got the floor plans room, where we shall discover something quite horrible, I guess, I think.
Much of the castle is old and hasn't been tended to for centuries. When the shadow arrives, it won't take long until things start falling apart.
We're just buying time anyway. Let's do what we can.
There isn't much to be done about the wards. We should reinforce weak structures. The ground will tremble and there's a risk everything will cave in on us, especially downstairs. Here, and there. Let's get the servants working on it.
And indeed we learn that Alexander and Daniel are working closely together at one point. Despite being told by our previous self that we really need to kill Alexander. And the piano, of course, goes again. Let's go see who's playing the piano. Oh, no one's playing the piano, of course. We have here maps, tabula. I have no idea how to pronounce that symbol. Let's go see what kind of... Oh dear. The roof gave away, guys. And now we are trapped. Indeed, there is no method of escape. Or is there? We shall see. What do we have in here? More collapsed roof. It looks like a continuation of the collapsed roof from the other side. Curiously, of course. We have another note here. Let's just loot the place slightly while we're doing that. Another tinderbox. How many tinderbox do I have now? 13. I forget if there's anything in here. There's nothing good in here. However, the final of Daniel's notes for the day.
May 1839. After pounding the unforgiving stone wall for what seemed like an eternity, I realized it was hopeless. I was trapped. I fell to the ground, gasping for air, trying to focus. That's when I saw a faint blue shimmer. My weakened body was heavy to carry, but I managed to push myself toward the enchanting light.
I have to admit, I love this section of the game. The camera is drawn automatically to the blue light, and we can wander into the darkness if we so choose, yet there is nothing really there to be seen. Though it sounds like we're in a place that perhaps is barely holding itself up. The faint light, of course. Now,
it was waiting for me. Enclosed in dark nothingness, I felt myself drawn to the mystic light.
Indeed, drawn to the mystic light. I wonder if perhaps it is destiny in some way, in some fashion. Because Daniel, of course, is in a pitch black room, a faint light may actually seem way brighter than it is. And in this case, I suspect that's what happened to a degree. Just have a look for a moment at the design of the pillar. There's nothing too special about the design of the pillar, it's just a curious thing to look at. The lighting effect here is pretty nice. I don't even think it's sprited, is it? I don't think that is sprited. That is... actually 3D, which looks really nice. Oh well, let's do what we must and get out of here.
I reached out, closing it in my hands. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirit me away, unlocking alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. The next thing I can remember is the grating sound of stone being lifted, the voices of the Arabs pulling me to safety, and grasped firmly in my hands was the broken pieces of a most peculiar relic.
So, Daniel having a big flashback to a moment in time which, no doubt, changed his life forever. If we just take a look at it, it says a few interesting things, because we can indeed read that note, even though it was actually like an entirely unique, like, playable cutscene type of thing. So he was trapped for hopeless hours. Wait, where was the actual quote? What does he say? It seemed like an eternity. I realized it was hopeless. So hopeless hours, close enough. And then he noticed the glow. So presumably, there's two explanations for why he didn't notice it immediately. First is panic. Second, it's entirely possible that it wasn't actually glowing at all until he was there for a while. That is a distinct possibility. Maybe the orbs do only activate with the presence of a person nearby or a being nearby. Perhaps this is a possibility. The faint glow escaped my fingers and began to spark brightly and spirited me away, unlocking alien memories of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. So, he was given visions, presumably, not actual memories. Visions, I'm saying presumably visions rather than memories, because it just feels like they were given to him, and just the easiest way is, just kind of, here, remember, fake remember having seen this thing, so it's a kind of vision type of thing. Of spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. All of this stuff in a single go, essentially. So what is he actually seeing? He's seeing separate spiraling towers, endless deserts, and impossible geometry. I mean, the spiraling towers and the impossible geometry kind of go together. It's entirely possible that he's just seeing the future, because in 1840, the skyscraper city skylines that exist now, not so much in the past. Though the endless deserts, probably not. It's entirely possible that these are actually all of separate worlds, theoretically. Because it's never specified, but these could be different times, could be different just places, different planets kind of thing, could be different dimensions if you want to do it that way, especially the impossible geometry bit. Though it's entirely possible that when he says impossible geometry, he just means, or Daniel just means, that it's geometry that to him, geometry of a building that just couldn't work, but actually can, but, given his limited knowledge of 1840s architecture, and he's actually not an architect anyway, it's entirely possible that to him the building looks impossible. It couldn't stand up by itself, and it might actually be impossible to stand up by itself. Maybe all the buildings in his visions actually do stand by themselves, and are assisted by some unknown means. And then essentially he escaped, but the orb is indeed broken. Yeah, he came out with the broken pieces, but the orb is indeed broken. Oh well. Let us continue through the archives. We are trapped now. The roof finally gave way, and now we have to find a way out. Perhaps this slight crack in the wall will lead us to an escape route. Fragile, but not breakable by hand. You sure about that? Fragile, but not breakable by hand. Fragile, but not breakable by hand. Are you sure it's not breakable by hand? Because it looks like it could be broken by hand. I'm sure if you just tried a little bit, Daniel, it's breakable by hand. Are you certain it isn't breakable by hand? Oh, there we go. It's breakable by hand. I feel like you have to click it enough times and pretty rapidly to break it. You are supposed to go and hunt for an object, such as this lovely knight's helm over here, and fling it at the wall, which works instantly. But evidently the developers decided that, we can't risk someone not being able to find a knight's helmet.
You have to be swift when you activate the first one. You hear that? If it stops, you'll have to start over.
Isn't all this a bit excessive?
You can never be too careful, Daniel.
And we now find ourselves in the local history room, conveniently. The game makes it pretty obvious that there's a hidden passage here. So first of all, it tells you directly, that is to say, Daniel has a memory of it, as a flashback to a memory of it, but also a draft and a faint light are coming from behind the shelf. There must be a way in. Oh, do you think? You can just look and it's there. However, there is an interesting book over here, which we need to gain access to. A book, I mean a note. I apologize. However, oh, I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Hold on. We need to gain access to it. We just need to be careful, careful, careful. Oh, dear. Well, never mind. It's... Oh, dear. Well, they're all broken now. Never mind. I'm sure no one will miss them. Let's have a look at this note. So, local folklore. Altsted and Brennenburg Castle, 1801. Another region rich with lore is Altsted, deep within the East Prussian woods. For centuries there have been stories surrounding the hamlet and its neighbour, Castle Brennenburg. The quiet forest-clad mountains dressed with scattered lakes is as picturesque as it can be, albeit the area is haunted by the dark. Ask any local and you will hear proof of the widespread superstition. All travelers should indulge themselves in such conversations, since it will certainly serve as exciting entertainment. All of them have their own twists on the tales, but there are some motifs that keep reappearing. The Gatherers. This story reaches all the way back to the time of the 30 Years' War. It is said that soldiers who abandoned their duty got lost in the cold, dark woods and were forever damned to roam the grounds. Their bodies, wrought by their tainted souls, have left them disfigured and empty of essence. Many have cited them over the years and described them as horrid revenants. They move silently through the woods, shying away from any beholder. They are called gatherers, as they seem to follow some ambition to steal living creatures. It is their prey which can be heard struggling inside damp burlap sacks dragged behind them, which reveal their presence. What dark scheme do they follow? Ooh, the gatherers, how nasty. And this is... This is the local history room, of course, so it has local history in it. This is folklore. This is a myth, essentially, of creatures which stalk the woods. Perhaps once human, perhaps maybe not human at all. A visit undone. Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, the well-known erudite, visited Altsted at the start of the 16th century. He resided in the local inn for a fortnight as he looked for remnants of kingdoms past. During his stay, all the prominent members of society paid notice, and he is mentioned in many records of the time. One day, he went to investigate a burrow in the northwestern glades, only to never be seen again. Heinrich is known to have passed away in Grenoble some 10 years later. He dismissed the notion of ever visiting Altsted, which makes you wonder, what really happened? Who was this mysterious man who visited the sleepy hamlet in the woods, and what happened to him? What happened to him? I like how this is considered a folklore, a guy turning up claiming to be Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and then disappearing. How that is as much folklore as something as horrible as the Gatherers. Monsters that stalk the woods. This is the kind of thing you tell your kids, you know, to keep them out of the woods, and then you do it as well because the woods are actually dangerous. This It's just a guy who disappeared. People disappear all the time, as sad as that is to say, either by choice or, you know, by accident, one way or another. But fair enough. We've now been told of the existence of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Useful to know. And then the Immortal Baron. Now this one is more worthy of the tales than the Agrippa story, I must say. The Baron of Brennenburg lives a reclusive life with his family at his castle nearby Altstead, and like most of those of noble birth, rumors are inherited alongside with the title. Researching the history reveals little before the castle was consumed by fire in the late 16th century. It was rebuilt by Alexander, a nobleman from the Rhinelands, claiming the role as protector of the Prussian state. Alexander helped the region to flourish and remain popular throughout his presumed lifetime. The family has always been secretive when it comes to lineage and heritage. Therefore, the birth and death of Alexander and his offspring has never been fully recorded. This has fed the idea that the Baron is in fact the one and the same who came from the west over 300 years ago, lived through the time of occupation, and joined the coveted Order of the Black Eagle, along with the great leaders of this country. Well, of course, we have indeed previously met the, well, our character has, our past version of Daniel has met Alexander, and he described him as peculiar, as I recall. So perhaps there is some truth to this. And yeah, so that rumor seems a little bit more worthy than Agrippa's, I must say, because Agrippa is just one guy who visited once and then disappeared slightly under mysterious circumstances. A baron who lives for 200 years, a bit more suspicious, I think. Let's open the amazing secret door that is so secret that you couldn't possibly just happen to randomly stumble upon it, eh? There we go. We have opened the hidden study. A cupboard here for hiding in, no less. Of course, of course. Just kind of, I wonder what happens if we, hold on. I don't think it's actually possible to do this, but I want to try. Oh, we are certainly not alone, guys, especially when that door suddenly changes its state from shut and locked to broken open. The item we did just find is not in fact the key for that door, it is in fact the key to the wine cellar. Tag reads wine cellar. I'm so glad that the game actually tells you what the keys are for, because some games are kind of annoying and don't do that. Do we find anything otherwise interesting in here? Well, we can possibly find some tinder boxes and stuff. Maybe we will. Let's have a look. Let's just have a bit of a look-see through here. Oh, another note. Regarding closing of the wine cellar. Wilhelm, I guess that would be pronounced actually in more Germanic languages. I'm going to go with Wilhelm. Wilhelm and his fools have endangered my research long enough with their absent-minded handling of the human vessels. The sheriff is keeping a watchful eye on the forest and is killing my trusty servants. It's just a matter of time until they follow the trail to Brennenburg. I need to lock Wilhelm and his men up to avoid further investigation from the public. The wine cellar will therefore be sealed off until the matter has been handled. Either the king's men leave or they will starve. Whatever comes first, they can rot for all I care. Maybe I will feed them some wine. It would, in a sense, solve both of my problems. Interesting that Alexander, presumably Alexander, is writing down notes about the evilish things he's doing. So Wilhelm, who we found a contract for previously, is the Baron doesn't like him anymore. Alexander doesn't like him, so he's going to just lock him up and hope that he dies. Curious that Alexander just locks him up and doesn't just, outright kill him. What do we find in here? Just a few books. Nothing too out of the ordinary. And now comes sort of the finishing piece, if you will, of this area. Oh. I like it. I like it. The finishing piece. Oh, we just saw a guy go that way. So what do? We don't go that way, do we? We don't go that way. Why would we go that way? Where the monster just came from? What could ever happen as a result? Oh, this is locked. A taste of what is to come in the game. I love these two set pieces. These are probably some of the best set pieces in the entire game. I can only assume that this is Daniel actually going insane. Or having flashbacks of the Gatherers. You see, it's not really clear in the game how... There is nothing, do not worry guys, I'm not missing anything. And yet, I feel the need to so quickly leave the area. It is not clear really, I don't think, how close Alexander and Daniel work together. Certainly at certain points they do. But does Daniel work alongside the, presumably, what are the Gatherers? Who knows? Anyway guys, I think we're gonna probably wrap this up here. We're gonna go back to the entrance hall where we started. We've acquired the key to the wine cellar. We can now go into the wine cellar. And the shadow makes its presence very aware. Walking on the shadow can hurt if we're not careful. There's a free tinderbox here though, which we cannot turn a blind eye at. This area has been distinctly even more sealed off than it was before. Okay guys, it's ramping up. We've learned that in fact the Baron, Alexander, who we need to kill, is rather more of a cad than first seemed, even though we knew the first was he needed to be killed. Anyway guys, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've enjoyed seeing... I think I got all the jump scares in that area. I think there are some jump scares that you can't trigger twice, such as the screaming voice on the stairs here. You can't trigger that twice. I could, create a new profile and trigger it, again there just for demonstration purposes, but I'm not sure if I'll bother with that. Curiously, notably, this chest has closed itself, but nothing is in here. Also, actually, something to note, it also feels like this room is slightly more red than it was before. I wonder if that's intentional or just kind of a side effect. I suspect it's quite intentional. Anyway guys, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!